Eyes on Longmont, offering a diversity of topics about our community that will inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Eyes on Longmont.
The Dougherty Museum houses a collection of antique automobiles, trucks, tractors, and musical instruments. It is located on Highway 287, about a mile south of Longmont. In the early 1970s, the Dougherty family decided to open their private collections to the public. In 1974, they began construction of a 29,000-square-foot building, which was completed in 1977. It is now open during the months of June, July, and August on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. It is also the site of the annual Yesteryear Farm Show, which is held the last weekend in August. The show features working displays of antique tractors and farm machinery, steam engines, stationary engines, threshing and baling demonstrations, blacksmithing, spinning and weaving, etc. Today, we will be looking at the agriculture machinery. Join us as we go inside for video 2.
Hello, my name is Doug Dougherty. Welcome to the Dougherty Museum. Joining me today is my good friend Bob Howard. Bob, today we're going to give a little more information about various machines in the museum. Bob, today we're going to start off with the American LaFrance fire engine. This engine was bought by Longmont in 1928. I don't know what they had for equipment before then, but I don't think they had anything in this class. This was a big unit for its day. Again, it's a 1928, in excellent condition. It has a big T-head 6-cylinder engine in it. I think it's 855 cubic inches, I believe. Same as the 855 Cummins engines of today. It was used for many years here in Longmont. It was number 1 for years, and then it later rolled backup rolls. And a little personal story, I remember in 1956, I believe, I was at Central Elementary School, 6th grade, and on Fire Prevention Week, this engine came and performed a little operation out in the street, putting out a small fire after they got the talk from the firemen on how to be careful with fire. So I have memories of that, and I can remember it sitting in the fire station at 4th and Kaufman for years also. Yeah. It has a siren also, so again, it's a very nice piece in excellent original condition. Here we have 2 or 3 items in this one frame. Bob, right in your foreground there is an early air compressor. I believe it's marked 1918. That came off the T.M. Thronson farm, as numerous items in the collection have. We'll have some more of those today to talk about. It still runs. I use it occasionally in summertime to air up tires. Here's a little Fairbanks Morse 1.5 horse stationary engine. Very common on farms to do very many odd jobs. This one's on steel truck wheels, so you can roll it around. And also you see it has handles there on the frame, so if you didn't have the truck wheels, you picked them up and moved them. In the background here is a nice 1916 Avery 2550 model, and it has a 4-cylinder opposed engine. It lays flat. You can just see the crankshaft is right here, and there's 2 cylinders there, and there'd be 2 cylinders back here. It's water cooled. That is the radiator, the tube radiator. And it's about the mid-size model. They made them twice as big as this, the 4080 Avery. Very similar to the 3060 Altman Taylor we saw last time, maybe even a little bit bigger. Averys were well thought of and good equipment. They made a whole line of farm equipment, the company did. The tractor is not completely restored, it's almost, and it does run very nice.
So that was a 4-cylinder.
Yeah. A pose, just like your VW, a little bigger.
Just like the Bug.
Yeah. Behind Bob is a early stationary International engine. It's a 10-horse. It was pulled to the job site by a team of horses and then used to do belt work of various kinds. Under the seat, you see that triangle grid-shaped thing. That's actually the, lack of a better word, the radiator. The water's pumped up there and it trickles down through there. It evaporates and cools. And you had to replenish the water supply occasionally because it did, again, it was evaporating and so you'd lose some. But it wasn't that big a deal, really. Here's another little stationary engine, also on a running gear, pulled by horses. A Whitty, and this is what they call a tilting saw table. This was found up near Allen's Park, and the gentleman there used it to cut his firewood. This is a big blade here that's quite unshielded. You put the log on the table and then tilt it into it like that. So it was, you know, if you were careful, it was relatively safe. And I'm sure it did a lot of work. Behind us here is a early steam tractor. It's an 1898 Star Altman, a different company than the Altman Taylor. And again, it was a early steam engine used for all kinds of belt work. But when my father found this engine, it was owned by the city of Longmont, and they'd reflued it, and they were actually using it to heat oil to repair streets, the creosote, I guess you call it, for patching work. And of course, this is many years ago, probably 50 years ago or more that I'm talking about. But we have run the engine, and like I say, at that time it had a practically new boiler, and everything was fine. We have two items here on this railroad cart, hand truck cart. One's a Fuller and Johnson single-cylinder engine on a pump jack. Now, if your farm had one of these, the boys didn't have to pump the water by hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure they were very popular. This item is a 32-volt Delco light plant. The farm rural areas were very late getting electrification. And so in the 20s and even into the 30s and early 40s in some areas, if you wanted electric lights, you had something like this. A lot of times the batteries were in the basement. The engine might even have been in the basement with the exhaust pumped outside so the fumes were vented. And I remember taking us out of a basement of a farmhouse, and there were these beautiful glass encased batteries there. And we didn't think to take one at the time to show what I'm talking about. I should have. But I think my dad had that. They might break when we pick them up, so that might have been part of it. But again, I think it was in the 40s, maybe after World War II, for some areas where had electric power brought to them.
So these were 32 volts, right?
Correct.
And an amazing thing about these 1920 technology was if you wanted lights in the middle of the night and you turned on the switch, the power would come from the batteries. The unit would sense the current draw and automatically start the generator, and then your lights would go on. So there was a time lapse between when you flipped the switch and when the lights actually came on.
Yeah, interesting. Again, Bob, we have another stationary engine, a little Cushman. I believe it's, what does it say, 4 horse?
4 horsepower.
It came as a unit. You can still make out the Cushman name there on the water tank. The water pump pumped the water up, and it came over that cone and evaporative cooling, similar to the engine we were talking about earlier. So, engine is a good original condition. That came off the Thronson farm again, just west of Longmont, near what is now the Silver Creek High School. The big engine behind me here also came from the Thronson farm. This engine was bought new in 1915 by Thorvald Thronson. He picked it up in Denver off a flat car and drove it to Longmont, rather than paying freight charges for another railroad to bring it to Longmont. Different railroad, I believe, had to transfer the car and all that. So again, he was an expert mechanic. He actually had two of these engines. This is the 65 horse. He had an 80 also. So he actually ran two custom thrashing outfits at the same time. And he reflued the engine in the early mid-50s. I think my father purchased it in 1958. And we've run it quite a bit. It has a whistle there. It's actually off a Burlington locomotive, which makes a nice sound when you have about 150 pounds of pressure on it. And again, it's a great original case tractor of that era. The 65 horse was probably the most popular. They made more of them than any of the models, I do believe. It was kind of mid-sized. They had a 110 horse, a huge engine. Very few of those were made, but there's still a few that survive. And again, it thrashed this neighborhood over south and west of Longmont for many years. In the back here, we'll get to it eventually, shortly, a cook car he made to go along with this to feed his crew. Here we have another single cylinder stationary engine. This has just a water tank here that surrounds the cylinder. And you just fill this with water. And you just check on it occasionally during the little steam will come off, as you know, during the day. And it just, as it evaporates off, you just replenish it. This is the clutch here that will engage the belt. We actually used this engine on the farm to fill grain bins for a number of years, running a John Deere elevator right here behind the museum. The two bins are still there. So it was easy to start and really a sweet running little engine.
Did you ever boil any eggs in the water hopper there, Doug?
No. Haven't
Could
tried
have had
that.
hot lunch.
Yeah. These two items here are, first of all, is a horse-drawn little portable steam engine with its own boiler. The team could pull it to the site wherever you needed to be to do your job and build up steam in the boiler and belt it up here to whatever you were going to run, and you had source of power. This is a little bit before the single-cylinder gas engines, some that we've been looking at here recently. Behind it is the 60 Cap. The 60 was the model number. That was the biggest Caterpillar tractor they made at the time. I believe this one's 1928. And it was in good running condition. We had it out at the farm show here a couple of summers ago. And it was running when we found it. It was on a farm just east of Ray, Colorado. And they were using it in the fall to pack silage. A big pit silo pile, and they drive this up on it and pack it. And so they kept it in running condition so they could do that. And they're fun to drive. We have 4 or 5 cats on the other aisle over here we'll briefly talk about, but I've driven it right to where you see it sitting and then drained the water and the fuel. And you can maneuver them just wherever you want them when they're running very easily. Push or pulling one is not so good. But when they're in motion, they're very maneuverable. Of course, that was one of the big selling points of cats anyway. And I think some of these probably had a winch-drawn blade that you could mount on them to push dirt. But this one was never used for that. It was just used for farm. The treads are in really good shape. They might have been replaced or they're the original. I really don't know, but these are very square-edged tracks, so they're in top condition. Did you ever run a Cat, Bob?
I did. I used to have a Caterpillar Model 20. And I kept it in town in my garage. And every now and then I'd start it up and pull it out in the driveway. It was a 1925, I believe.
Okay. I think we've got a 20 over here in the other aisle. Here we have what is called a cook car. This was handmade by Thorvald Thronson to accompany his thrashing crew again. And it's dated 1915. That's the same year he bought the Case tractor we were just talking about a few moments ago. In this area, it was common for a thrashing crew to hire all the crew, the cooks, his own cook car, and feed his crew 3 meals a day. Back in the Midwest, I've been told, it was common for housewives from different farms to gather together and feed the crew, and the crew came from the different farms, and they moved around the community that way. But in this area, I've been told, the thrasher provided everything. He came with so much a bushel, that was the charge. So again, inside the car, there's a stove and cabinets and an ice chest in the floor, and they would feed the entire crew in here. According to my sign here, it says the average crew of 60 years ago would include the engineer, separator man, 9 bundle wagon drivers in teams, 5 bundle pitchers, a water hauler, a cleanup man, a cook, and her helper. The thrashing run would usually about a month or maybe more, depending on the season. So this car was in pretty good a shape yet, and we've actually used it for fun a couple of times, had family gatherings and stuff in here. So the men sat and faced out on each side, so about 18 men could sit down in here and have their meal. We have a picture here that we just acquired this summer from descendants of Thorvald Thronson. It shows the cook car and a crew. The man on the far left is Norman Thronson, who in our first episode owned the 2575 Altman Taylor steam tractor and ran a thrashing crew also. And the man next to him is Thorvald Thronson. Probably taken in the teens, 1918 or somewhere in that area, I'm going to guess. So that was the goal. They park it near a shade tree if possible. And the cooks would work in here making 3 meals a day.
Wow. With the wood-burning stove.
Yeah.
In the middle of the summer.
Warm work, for sure. Oh. Here we have a row of 4 Caterpillar tractors, different sizes. Behind you, Bob, is a 30 model. It's about half the size of the 60 we looked at earlier. And here we have a 20. I believe you said you had a 20 at one time. Next to that's a 10, and up in the front's a 2-ton, earlier one. These were very popular with some farms, truck farms, I think, and in orchards, that sort of thing, where they were could move narrowly through trees and rows. As far as straight farming, I was never too fond of them because you're constantly adjusting the clutch to keep it straight. But for maneuverability, they couldn't be beat. These all run. They don't look too great, but they all run. They were parked right here and then drained of the gas and water. And they start very easily, believe it or not. And they were expensive tractors for their day, but they definitely had their purpose and place. Again, this is a 20 and a little 10 here. It's the smallest size they believe they made. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then ahead of that is the 2-ton, which was brought out a little earlier. And just about the time they combined with Best and Holt, and then it became Caterpillar as a result. That one has the Caterpillar script on it, but it has the tiller steering instead of the 2 hand clutches. And it also has a power takeoff belt pulley there on the back, so you could power things, whatever you needed to with a belt. I may have mentioned it earlier at one time, I might not have. The Baker family, when they were later years still running one of the big yellow boy separators, they actually powered it with 2 2-tons, one on each side, belted up to each side of it.
Oh, wow.
They still have those tractors, I believe. That one was found out at Holyoke, right at the edge of town. And again, started up, drove it on the truck, and hauled it home. The 30 came from, again, a farm sale just south of Ray, and it was running condition. And I wasn't in on it when my dad got these 2, but if they weren't running, he soon had them running. So. Bob, this is a Mogul, the first international model. And it's basically a stationary engine that they put on a running gear. It's a single cylinder, horizontal. It has a water jacket around the cylinder, just like these other stationary engines we looked at earlier today. And evaporated water goes off there, so periodically you had to check it and just put some more water in. So that was the radiator. Chain drive, heavy duty chain there. And believe it or not, as crude as they look, they were a pretty successful tractor. They're very dependable, and they sold quite a few of them. The model that followed it was the Titan, which is a 2-cylinder that replaced the Mogo. I believe it was 2 years ago. I had it out at the farm show, running on the field out here.
Mm-hmm.
And by the third day, I finally had it running pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Behind you is a fairly early Fordson, made by the Ford Motor Company. Henry Ford got into making tractors and soon surpassed everybody else in volume with his manufacturing techniques. The early Fordsons didn't have fenders. You see, this one does. And it has a flat plate here. And these tractors are notorious for, on a hard pull, they would just lift the front end up. And several of them went clear back over, and there were some injuries and fatalities as a result. So Ford came out with this fender, and this flat part would hit the ground and stop it from tilting any further, giving the operator time to get it clutched in and get the front end to drop back down again. So when you see a Fordson with these big skirt fenders, that was the reason.
Uh-huh. Kind of, what did they call those? A wheelie bar on a hot rod?
Could be. And they have a little toolbox built into it here for convenience. And they replaced a lot of horses with these Fordsons. They were very popular. I don't know the production number, but I know they made thousands upon thousands of them. We're looking at two tractors here. The first one is a Twin City, which became the Minneapolis Moline in later years. This one's called their 1220 horsepower, 4-cylinder valve and head engine. If you look at it, it's very similar to the Moline U's and G's of later days. Not that much difference. Again, on steel. Rubber was available soon after that, but you could get them either way. You had two choices. And some farmers preferred the steel because you never had a flat. The tractor here is a Hyder. This is found down here near Broomfield on a farm. The Hyder was a friction drive tractor. And the setup's not totally unlike some of your garden tractors and stuff today even that are friction drive. The engine, the 4-cylinder engine, is mounted on a subframe, and the engine and radiator, that whole assembly will slide back and forth. The flywheel is about this wide, and it has a fiber coating on it. And you can engage this wheel here. You can move it by the lever, move it and engage that flywheel, and that'll start it spinning. There's one on the other side just like it. One gives you forward, one gives you reverse. And believe it or not, if they were maintained properly and you didn't slip them, they would actually hold up and work. They sold these for years. They had two sizes. This is the small one. And it runs very well, believe it or not. I was just noticing the one tank is marked kerosene and the other tank is marked gasoline. So you started them on gas and got them hot, and you could switch over to kerosene. A little cheaper fuel. And Rock Island Plow Company, you still read some of the lettering on the hood. And again, it's amazing to see it run. I should get it out for the farm show one of these years.
That would be fun.
They're pretty rare. Now we're going to talk about a couple of farm trucks. This first one is a 1917 Traffic.
A Traffic.
Traffic, 4-cylinder, gas. And it's, not to get too technical, but it's called internal gear drive for the rear end. The rear end differential is only about this big around. And the gear reduction is taking place out at the wheel. There's a case filled with oil there, and the gear reduction happens in there. Somewhat like a planetary, but not exactly, but close. So it was a fairly heavy-duty truck, a delivery truck. It has a stake bed box on it. We have a load of stationary gas engines on it, to place to display them. And it had a cab, so you had a little shade, but no doors or anything. This is kind of the start of cabs. Was pretty much this was factory, by the way, but a lot of them were homemade. Somebody'd make a cab to suit whatever they wanted to do.
And this here is the gas tank.
That is the gas tank.
That's the gas tank right in front of the steering wheel.
Exactly.
I wonder where they put the ashtray.
That made
Yeah.
the gravity flow to the carburetor, so you never had any fuel pump problems. But I don't think that get OSHA approved today.
Not
having a
with
gas tank.
the
located
gas
there.
tank and your feet under the gas tank.
Yeah. Next, we'll move across the aisle to another truck. Here we have a Model T Ford truck, 1923, 1-ton. The cab, I was just reading the plaque, was made by the Fort Smith Body Company. So the chassis was without a cab, and you could buy these bodies made by different companies. A lot of accessories were made for Ford Model Ts. And the Ford hadn't started building his own cab yet. I believe in 23, he came out with a metal cab called a C model. It was pretty much basically open, but from then on, you could get closed, something in appearance similar to this. For a load, we've got a couple more stationary engines on here. This truck was actually used on the Dougherty farms for many years feeding turkeys.
Ah,
They had a 300 or 400 gallon water tank mounted right behind the cab, and the back was just sacked mash or feed. They had their own feed mill, and so you just go fill the water tank and the sacks and drive out and feed this flock, go back, reload, go feed another flock. They usually had several flocks. And the single tires, I've been told by my dad, you can see it just has one single rear tire and a single front. And you'd be out there in a flock of turkeys, they'd be all around the truck when you're rocking. You get in to move it, you'd actually almost kind of push them out of the way with a wheel. They were slow to move. And the advantage of the single tire was the turkey would either go on one side or the other of it. Now if you had a truck with duals, that was a whole different matter.
it gets
They'd
stuck
get pinched
in between.
occasionally, you'd lose a bird. So that's why it was used for many years, I think, was the single tires. Again, a Model T was very dependable. My dad and grandfather knew them inside and out, and they didn't have any trouble keeping one running. Here we have a Kissel truck, a 3-ton. They made a 5-ton, I believe. So this is kind of their mid-sized model, but still a pretty good sized truck compared to the Model T. To repeat myself again, this came off the Thorvald Thronson farm. Thorvald probably bought it new. It has a beat box on it. And the cab, kind of a skeleton cab again, pretty open, but a little protection from the sun and a rain shower. 4-cylinder engine. Originally had a settling tank and lights on it. I can see the settling tank would have mounted in here. Center control, so you've got a 3-speed forward transmission. And it runs, and believe it or not, we used this on the farm here a little bit. One fall we had some beet tops on the farm and had the tops piled. And we went out and loaded the piles after they'd cured for a month or two onto this truck. And we found out you could put it in first gear and at idle. It was so slow, you could just walk alongside it, load your beet tops, and just keep a steady pace going.
And let the truck drive itself.
And the truck steered itself. So probably 25 miles an hour was top speed anyway. And a solid, what they call solid rubber rear tires. There's no tube in here, that's a solid tire. So you had no flats. And they were very popular on the heavy trucks for many years before the pneumatic took over. This tractor is a Minneapolis, a different company than the Twin City that came Minneapolis Moline. They made thrashing machines and pretty much a full line of farm equipment. As you can see, this tractor is a 4-cylinder cross mount. In other words, the engine sits crosswise to the frame of the tractor. Maybe one advantage was the power was direct. You didn't have to turn a corner, 90-degree corner with your power. You do with an inline engine. You can see the fan here was driven by a belt coming off the side over there, and a water radiator, and a pretty streamlined looking hood for the day. Here's your gas tank, and it looks like it's 2 separate compartments, so you're probably kerosene and gasoline again. Again, to use the gas to get them started. And if they got hot, you could switch over to the kerosene. On steel, this one doesn't have any lugs on it right now, so you could drive it on pavement or on concrete without scratching things up. But when they were using them in the field, they had cleats on here. The holes in the front wheel there are for a ring that you put on there, so when you went to steer, the ring would bite into the grout. A slip ring, or I'm not thinking of the right word for that, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah.
A rib.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can bolt that on or off. And other than that, it's just one of the many makes of tractors that were, this is 1918, so they got started early. A lot of companies building tractors competing head to head with one another, and the horse was on its way out.
Yep.
This streamlined looking tractor is actually a 1913 Case. This was their first gas model. It's a 2-cylinder opposed. The engine stretches clear inside here quite a ways. This is the flywheel, and also you just turn that to start it. That's your crank, for lack of a better word. It's called the 1225 horsepower, 12 on the drawbar, 25 on the belt. This engine is a very smooth runner. The opposed engines were really nice. They're easy to balance. This running gear, I've been told, is very similar to the smallest Case steamer they use. They just used this bull wheel from that when they first got started. So, what did you say this reminded you of, Bob?
It looks like a casket.
And it's very streamlined, enclosed like that, way ahead of its time. And I'm not sure Case stayed with that look, as we'll see in the next tractor. But this tractor was bought new and used right over here north of Niwot on a farm. And I remember going over with my dad with the Minneapolis U and just towed it home, and the diagonal wasn't even there then. It was all dirt roads, and it was a cool to cold winter day. I remember that on a Saturday morning. This is a 1920 Case, 2240 horsepower. A cross mount, again, the engine is sitting across the frame. A very massive and heavy tractor for its size. This tractor came off a farm just west of Hygiene, the Fred Wenzel farm. And we went over and it wasn't running, but we somehow got it up on the truck, and we found out this tractor is very heavy. There's a massive frame in here and everything. It was on a F500 Ford truck, and we didn't need anything more on it. But it was a short trip home, so that was good. And of course, it didn't take my dad long to have it running. Just an example, it was kind of a mid-size. They made tractors a lot bigger than this again, and smaller in the cross-mount design. But again, another local piece, just a few miles from here. Bob, this is a Model C Case. Probably their smallest model. I'm not sure of that, but I kind of think that's probably right. This is called a skid ring. I couldn't think of that earlier. That one's pretty well worn down, but that gave you traction when you were turning in soft soil. Obviously a steel wheel with very sharp pointed lugs. Again, no flat tire to go flat, so that was the advantage of the steel. And you remember back a few years ago, it's been a while, you don't see these signs anymore, but you see a sign say, lugs prohibited. Well, that's what they were talking about. Don't cross the road with those, because you'll chew it up, asphalt road. This tractor was right here in the area. A friend called me and said, I saw an ad in the Times Call about this Case tractor. So, of course, we checked it out and bought it on the spot. It was running. It was a nice running tractor today. Very nice size for small farms, operation, or light work, cultivating or whatever. And it's a fun little tractor to drive.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing down the Case row, this is the last one. This is a 1937 Model L on rubber. As you can see, if you don't pump up the tires periodically, you get a low tire. Well, steel had the advantage over that.
Mm-hmm.
This tractor again was on the Thorvald Thronson farm. Thorvald was a case dealer for a number of years. And that's a factory experimental cab. And they sent that tractor out to him and said, here, you try this out and see how you like it, and what feedback. And I remember Thorvald saying it was great for fall plowing, early spring work. It was cold, but in the summertime, it was way too warm in there.
I'll bet.
The windows do open, but still, if you had a good breeze, you had no air circulation. So again, another local tractor in original condition. And I don't know how the factory results came. I don't think they put cabs on anything for a number of years after that, but that was something they were looking at anyway in the late 30s. I believe you've mentioned you had an L at one time.
I had an L, and it had spoked wheels. And I see these are cast iron for more weight,
Okay.
with just one big nut holding them on to the axle.
The last two tractors we have here, the first one is a McCormick Deering Farmall. Their model F20. They made very many of these tractors over a number of years. I don't know the production number, but they were really a popular size and tractor. It's on steel, again, no lugs on it at this point in time. They had a little interesting feature that when you turned the steering wheel hard left or hard right, there was a cable came back and would engage the brake on this side if you were turning left, so that you'd spin around quicker. For cultivating and that sort of work, at the hedgerow you just spin right around. And later they came in with foot actuated turning brakes. You could use either pedal. This kind of was incorporated into the steering system. Behind us here, behind it, we have a 1909 Samson Model M. Samson was made by General Motors in direct competition with the Ford Fordson. They lasted just a few years. They lost money on them, I've been told, and so they soon quit making them. And, but it was GM's attempt to compete head-to-head with Henry Ford and his Fordson tractor. They are somewhat rare at this point in time, but because the production wasn't that great. And there's a club of Samson collectors. There's a man putting together all the serial numbers and models and horsepower and where they're located. And we find in different makes that's not uncommon for some individual to take that on and try to gather as much data as he can. And it helps if you're searching for parts or something to have that kind of a resource. So that's your Samson. The last item we're going to look at today, Bob, is this case thrashing machine or separator. This was one of the last ones built, probably in the 40s. And as you can see, it's pretty original yet. It's got original paint and the names on it, that sort of thing. Didn't spend much time outside. And again, to repeat myself, this was Thorvald Thronson's last separator.
Wow.
And I think you could put it out in the field and go to work. It's just up in top shape. You see the main drive belt is rolled up over there that you'd run out to your engine or tractor that's running it, and pulled out the feeder housing, turn the blower around, and this comes off this side to dump the clean grain into your wagon or truck. And I'm not sure, but I think you probably half a day on that, you'd be ready to thrash.
Wow.
They were all metal galvanized, but this one didn't spend a whole lot of time out in the weather. And it was originally on rubber. So that was, the combines were coming in, and this was about the end of the separator.
The end of the threshing machine days.
Yeah. I'd like to thank you for visiting today the Dougherty Museum. We're open in the summertime, the 3 months, June, July, and August, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. And our hours are 11 to 5. And we hope to see you come visit and get more information. If you have any questions on this equipment, we have a good staff here who can help answer questions. I want to thank Boulder County again for providing us in their tax work-off program, so they have people here who are our docents and can man the desk, and it really helps the family in keeping it open 3 days a week during the summer. The season is usually 13 weeks. I also want to thank Bob for helping me out today. And Bob's the main cog, one of the main cog wheels of the farm show that happens every August. I believe it's the weekend before Labor Day. It's a 3-day show we have here on the field north of the museum. And we have usually a couple hundred tractors or so come in and various other things to see. So it's really quite an interesting show, and a lot of educational people can actually see this stuff working, which is a lot better than just a static display sometimes. So, again, thank you for visiting, and hope to see you come visit the museum in the future.